Our next speaker today could walk out here, tell us that he's the guy who beat Tom Daschle, and then leave, and we'd still give him a standing ovation. But I hope he shares a little more than that. He served almost a dozen years in Congress, and he's never failed to support hunters and gun owners. He's voted to protect the firearms industry, to prevent the feds from keeping government lists of lawful gun owners, and recently sponsored right to carry reciprocity nationwide. Senator, we all appreciate your hard work on that effort, and we'll continue until it gets passed. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a great friend of every American gun owner, the Senator from the state of South Dakota, Mr. John Thune.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Chris, for that very generous introduction. It's great to be with all these freedom-loving Americans here in Charlotte, North Carolina today. And I have to say that you've heard from Wayne LaPierre, Chris Cox, from Chuck Cunningham. You have a great team at the NRA. They advocate so effectively on your behalf in the nation's capital, and one of the reasons they are so effective is because they have the respect. And that's not something that comes naturally. You have to earn that. And they gained it because they have character. They mean what they say and they say what they mean. And that's really important in a place like Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we are at a crossroads in this country. We have two competing visions about what the future of this country is going to be like. One consists of more government and less freedom, and the other one consists of less government and more freedom. And right now, unfortunately, the prevailing vision in Washington, D.C. is that of government, more and more government. That's why we have trillion-dollar stimulus bills. That's why we have $2.5 trillion health care expansions. That's why we have takeovers. That's why we have bailouts. That's why we have 40 cents out of every dollar that Washington, D.C. spends now is borrowed. China is our largest creditor. And that's why the next generation is being saddled with a mountain of debt that is going to confine them to a standard of living and a quality of life that is lower than what we've known. Now, the liberals are running Washington, D.C. It's probably the most liberal president and the most liberal Congress in decades, if not in history. In spite of that, the one exception to everything I just mentioned in terms of the trend line in this country is on the issue of the Second Amendment. In July of 2008, we got 62 votes in the United States Senate to ensure that the District of Columbia abides by the Supreme Court Heller decision. About a year later, we got 67 votes in the United States Senate. Congress passed and the President signed into law legislation that would allow law-abiding citizens to transport and carry firearms on lands that are managed by the National Park Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In December of last year, we were able to get legislation passed that would make sure that on Amtrak, firearms and ammunition could be checked as luggage just like it is on our airlines. And hopefully here in a few months, we will be able to pass legislation in Congress that would end this arbitrary process by which our veterans are stripped of their Second Amendment rights. And finally, as Chris mentioned earlier, we didn't get to the 60-vote threshold that was necessary to pass it, but we got a decisive majority, 58 votes in the United States Senate for my concealed carry legislation that would ensure that the Second Amendment doesn't end at state lines. Now, how did we have all that success in an environment when you've got the most liberal White House and the most liberal Congress in decades? You have to ask yourself that question. You know how? Because of you. Because of the people across this country, those members, card-carrying members of the NRA, who are out there educating Americans about responsible and safe firearm use. It's because of the advocacy that you undertake with your elected officials, both in state capitals and Washington, D.C., to help them understand that the Second Amendment matters to you. That's why we have seen success at a time when the prevailing vision, as I said, in Washington, D.C., is of more government and less freedom. Now, one of the biggest threats that I think that we face going forward is when it comes to appointments to the federal courts. One of the most awesome responsibilities I think that we have as United States Senators is the duty and the responsibility that we have to confirm judges to the federal courts. We need to make sure that as United States Senators, we take that responsibility very seriously. And we need to ask appointees, nominees to the federal courts, including Elena Kagan, what is her view on the Second Amendment? How is she going to make decisions? We need to make sure that we fight the battles in this country and that we never give up, because there are those out there who are constantly the anti-gun elites from places around this country who are always on the attack. I want to read for you something that one of my colleagues said during the debate on the Concealed Carry Amendment in the United States Senate. And I won't mention his name to protect the guilty, but he said, "We're being asked to seriously consider an amendment that would benefit those criminals, not their victims." Now, we're going to have people who are going to continue to try and close gun shows, and as I said, we're going to have a battle over the courts, but it's a battle, ladies and gentlemen, that we need to be engaged in every single day. Now, I grew up, as many of you did, with the tradition of gun ownership and responsible firearm use. I remember taking the hunter safety course when I was 12 years old, getting my permit, and on the opening day of sharp-tailed grouse season in South Dakota, I went out with my dad and some of his friends, and we were hunting the river breaks on the White River, which is not too far from my hometown. And I was walking down this finger draw, and I came up to a plum thicket, and a covey of sharp-tailed grouse busted out of there, and I mounted my single-shot .410, and I smoked one of them. And I've been hooked for life. And there are very few experiences that I've had in my lifetime that rival that. And even now, after hundreds and hundreds of hunts, there is still a thrill that comes with that experience that doesn't compare to anything else that I know. And that's a tradition that we want to be able to pass on to the next generation. My grandfather came here. He was an immigrant from Norway. My father was a World War II combat pilot. They taught me values. They taught me responsible firearm use. I want to pass that on. I've got 2 daughters. I take them hunting, and I've taken them to the range because I think it's important that they know how to responsibly use firearms. And we're going to continue that tradition in my family, and I know that you are in yours too. I have a plaque on the wall in my office. It's a quote from a Prime Minister of the Netherlands back in the 1800s. And it goes something like this. He said, "When principles that run up against your most deeply held convictions begin to win the day, then battle is your calling and peace has become sin. You must, at the price of dearest peace, lay bare your convictions before friend and enemy with all the fire of your faith." Ladies and gentlemen, when our freedoms are threatened, battle is our calling. And when it comes to the big debate between more government and more freedom, we need to tell Washington, D.C. loudly and clearly, all patriotic Americans, that when it comes to that basic choice, we choose freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, keep up the good fight. Never quit battling for our Constitution. Never quit defending our Second Amendment. God bless you, and may He continue to bless these United States of America. Thank you very much. God bless you.